Welcome to Voice of the Voiceless, Speak Your Truth. I want to start this podcast again with acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording, the Maiwan Bullock clans of the Bunurong tribe, sovereign and first people of the Karim area.
Our guest in this podcast is Leonie Blackwell. Leonie is a passionate naturopath and counsellor specialising in emotional well-being and the author of Making Sense of the Insensible and The Box of Inner Secrets. At the age of 24, she was diagnosed with human seminal plasma hypersensitivity, which awakened her innate knowledge that everything could be fixed and there would always be a solution, and that mental and emotional health was just as important as physical health. She decided to turn to natural therapies and decided to start up her own business as a naturopath. Leonie strives to help everyone live with a greater understanding of how our brain functions and the links between physiology, psychology, and happiness. In this podcast, Leonie shares her experience and insight into emotional and brain development. Leonie reframes the way that society perceives child emotional and brain development by offering an understanding of what is going on beneath the surface. She busts many myths and drops many truth bombs along the way, which is an integral part of changing our approach to child rearing.
Hi Leonie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Emily. It's great to be here.
So just to give us a general overview to begin with, can you talk us through a little bit about your work in emotional and brain development?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something I'm doing more and more these days, and I love it because we now understand so much about how the brain works. And so many parents today don't want to have their children grow up with the same wounds, the same, hurts and the same insecurities that that they experienced when they were children. And so a lot of the work I do is helping parents understand that as our brain grows from the time of conception through to 25, each stage, each year relates to opportunities to learn new skills, that physical stuff, but it's also about our emotional development. And so at each year of our child's life and each year of our lives when we were children, we were having opportunities to experience but what I call our needs, like the need to be worthy, to be loved, to have freedom and independence, those sorts of things. And at each year, our brain grows and we think about it differently than we did before. And so no one talks about helping parents understand their child's brain development to be able to understand that each of the stages that the child's growing through, they will think differently, perceive things differently, interpret. So you can do exactly the same thing today that you may have done 2 years ago, but the child will see it, experience it differently than they did because their brain has developed to a different level, a different part and therefore they experience it differently than what they have before. So the more we can understand brain development with our emotional, social development, the more parents are able to actually cater for the evolving, growing child that's in front of them. And that takes a lot of pressure off and a lot of stress. It also helps us understand how our wounds got formed. Because then we can understand that we have to understand that we've never lived in a generation that's effectively managed our emotions. We don't know this stuff and we're not learning it yet. And so part of what I love about the work I get to do is I get to shed light on stuff that's been unknown and help parents actually consciously raise their children, understanding the needs that are coming on at any given time, that they can then cater for those and help the child learn the lesson of being worthy, being loved, belonging, being accepted, being approved of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this understanding for parents would be integral to their supporting role as a parent.
Yes.
And being able to adapt for that, every different individual stage.
Absolutely, because so many parents come to me and they're either terrified that they're creating issues for their children, damaging their self-esteem, or they're expecting their children to do things they're not actually capable of doing yet. So many of like, well, why can't they just think like this? It's like, well, their brain hasn't developed to that skill yet. So being able to take the pressure off parents to be able to understand that it is constantly evolving and changing. And so when parents say things to me, I don't get why they're saying that. And it's like, well, because their brain has reached a stage of development where they can now perceive that, and they couldn't perceive it years before. So it takes a lot of pressure, I think, off, because it empowers, and children love it. Like, love it. I love working with the children, because when I work with them and they tell me what's going on in their lives, and I go, and I put my hand out, and I get them to put their hand out, and I shake their hand and go, congratulations, you're being 6. Congratulations, your brain's being 9. Congratulations, your brain's being 4. And they kind of smile and go, because it takes the pressure off the kids as well, because then they get to understand that their brain's just growing and that they're learning this stuff too. And once they understand that they're just going to learn these skills, learn this experience, learn about what it feels like to be worthy, or to matter, whatever it might be, they are relieved by it as well, because then they can just be kids. They're allowed to be in that space, and it's a beautiful thing to watch the pressure drop off the children as well.
What sort of changes do you see in the relationship between the parent and child after they have this understanding?
Chalk and cheese. I mean, it is, and that to me is the most beautiful part. It's every part, I love them all. But do you mean it is just gorgeous, because the parents and the child get along much better? So part of my working with them is that I empower the parents with the knowledge and the child with the knowledge. And then with the child, I brainstorm strategies about how they can learn the lesson and how they can embrace it, and what do they need their parents to do. And then we sit with the parents and we talk with their parents about when they're going through this stage, when they're feeling this way, when they don't know how to express themselves, or when they're interpreting things this way, what kind of things can you do to support them? And the parents are like, yes, I can do that. So the child and the parent end up with these strategies to help the child grow through the lesson that they're going through. And so they become a team. They're becoming a team of each of them respecting the skills and the role and the evolving lessons that they're both going through, because the parent never learnt it either. And that's my point. Our parents didn't know. Our grandparents didn't know. Their parents didn't know. There's no generation that's been able to teach this for it to be able to move forward. So the parents are learning, and it gives the opportunity for the child to see that their parents are willing to learn, adapt with them and work with them. And so they feel more supported and heard than they may have previously. And the child doesn't feel so flawed. The child doesn't feel like they're meant to be getting something right that they don't know how to, and the parent then also doesn't have that. So everybody's less burdened by the process. And with that, then there's more joy. There's more fun. There's more, because each can step through understanding the process. It's liberating. It's really liberating for everybody. It's beautiful. And therefore there's more love, there's more connection. The child gets to feel more nurtured, more supported, which is so important that the child gets to know those things.
Yeah.
And parents want to do it. I'm not saying they don't. It's just that because they don't understand the child's development, they don't quite realise what's going on.
And I can imagine that would be incredibly humbling as well for the parent's perspective, to be able to just let go of expectations or whatever they feel their child should be doing, or and just get down and grow with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, don't get me wrong, there will be parents that really struggle with the getting humble stage.
Yep.
Do you mean? Some because they feel like they've got to be in control and get it all right and perfect themselves because they were raised in all that pressure. But, sometimes you just got to edge them into it for them to surrender. And when they actually apply the strategies and the child actually steps into that space of being able to just be able to say, I'm trying to learn this stuff, Mum, and this is that thing that, and they will call me Oni. That's what Oni was talking about. Do you mean? Then the parents slowly go, all right, you probably, okay, you are telling me something I need to know. And so they can kind of, become more humble in it. I find children are very willing to embrace it, because They want to feel better.
Yeah.
They want to be okay, you know. So parents just have to let go a little. And that's the hard part, because there's so much pressure out there.
Yeah.
Society just fills us with stuff. And society names things incorrectly. They associate things and put labels on things. And then so parents are running off thinking it's something outside over here, and they're not understanding where it's really coming from. And I think I find that a little mean, I think, in our society. We've done it forever, generations upon generations, but it ends up being really quite hard and harsh for people who are really trying to do the very best that they can do.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so many expectations.
Yeah.
And parents can really feel that pressure.
Absolutely. And I think for generations, parents always have. You know, whatever the societal, I talk about generational conditioning. Every generation has their own expectations that society had for them. You know, if we go back and we see it in the movies all the time in the 1950s, the expectation was the picket fence, you know, the 2.2 children, the happy family, the mum at home cooking lovely fresh food, you know, all that kind of stuff, and dad coming home. Like, that was an expectation of those times. But it's moved, and we have them: the big house, the cars, the number of children, the clothes that your children are dressed in, the schools your kids go to, whether or not, you know, whose kid grew teeth first, like, because that's something we can control. And, you know, and, you know, did they walk, what age? And there's all this kind of almost competition, which is, you know, welcome to the patriarchal society. You know, we live in a Western first world culture that's patriarchal, and it's about winners and losers. It's about people who, you know, and so we have to step outside of that, and that's often quite difficult because we don't want to fail the societal expectation, our generational expectation, our cultural expectations, our gender expectations. So we have to dismantle a lot of what I call collective lies. We have to dismantle the bullshit and really find our own truth, which is not going to be found in all of those rules that's being created by other people outside of ourselves.
Do you help parents find that balance as well between their expectations and the understanding of what's actually going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot, like, often the children come to me because the parents are already my clients. And so I'm working with the parents with, you know, tapping or flower essences or nutrition and all that stuff, and helping with their health. And that it always ends up, once their physical health is in a much better place, their emotional well-being becomes a centre point. And so we then begin to work with those things. And in the process of helping the parents understand their stresses, I usually end up in a conversation about child brain development and where the children are at. And they'll say things to me and I go, oh, hang on, how old's your child now? And they'll go, oh, just turned 6 or just turned 5 or just turned, you know. And I'll go, okay, so your child's brain is just developing these awarenesses, and that's why they're going through that. And then they'll say, can you see my child? I go, yes. And then they'll bring their child and then we'll have that conversation. So it becomes that whole, you know, process of the entire family that I can work with, which has been fantastic, because in the end we're units, you know, we are family units, and one individual person is one part, but you've got to be able to work on all the parts.
And every part affects each other as well.
Yes, we're interdependent, and and your families are very, very, I mean, you know, the see, there we go. The energy that actually goes on between family members, you know, because we're not just, what we think is basically a vibration. What we feel is a vibration. And the reality is, small children, and this is one of the things that I often say to parents, when, you know, the first 2 years of a child's life, a mother's sole entire existence is about catering for that child. And that's really challenging for women, because especially to modern day women today, where they're expected to work and have life and do all these other things besides being a mother. But the first 2 years of a child's life, they depend on the mother being 100% present to them. But then when the child turns 2, the mother needs to step back and allow the child to form their own identity. Now, energetically, a child under the age of 2 does not know